So I'm here to talk to you about Henri, which is one of the projects that's been nominated for this evening. And I'll just tell you a little bit about why we did it, what we did, and what we learned from it. So I'll start off with why. I work for a design agency called Method. We're based in San Francisco, London, and New York. And one way I like to look at design is that if you have a think about when somebody uses an application or touches a button on a screen or touches a button on a device or speaks to someone in customer services, we could consider that that's a dialogue between a brand and a customer. And for us at Method, having a say in why this dialogue happens, what it is, and when it happens is what we call experience design. So when we're designing products and services with our clients, we look at things through three lenses. We look at things through the brand lens, through the user lens, and through the business lens. And we've been around for about 15 years now. And historically, we've always worked with screens. And one of the things that screens are really good at is relaying information. You can have text, icon, color, video, sound. They're very, very, very good at communicating. And if you look at how kind of design is changing and products are changing in recent years, it's quite interesting to look at objects. Objects have typically been around to be used. They haven't really been around to relay information. But what's happening is that smart objects are starting to have to convey information. So like a connected toothbrush needs to tell you something, a connected e-cigarette needs to tell you something, a connected smoke detector needs to tell you something. And what we're finding is that objects are needing to communicate information in the same way that screens are. But the problem is that they're really ill-equipped for this. We're kind of like limited to lights and vibrations and sound and maybe being relayed to an app. So at Method, we've just been thinking about how can we draw on the last 15 years that we've been working in this industry. What have we learned about designing for screens? We can apply to objects. What is the language of an object? How does an object communicate if it can only use something like light or vibration or sound? So I'll tell you a bit about kind of how we answered this, which was about a year ago. Whilst we were having these conversations, IXDA were holding Interaction 15 in San Francisco, and they asked us to facilitate a workshop about the future of design. And this we felt was like a good venue for us to explore with a group of designers, what this language for objects could be. So I'll just kind of take you through three parts of this. One was, how did we create this language? Another one is how did we use it? And lastly, what did we learn from it? So as we were saying, we knew that the kind of vocabulary we were going to be using was going to be lights. And if any of you have fiddled around a bit with electronics and Arduinos, it's not easy. If we want to get people communicating with something like light patterns, we do not want them to be thinking about what resistor to wire into where and what line of code to write, because then they'll only be thinking about how they're doing something and not the meaning behind it. So right from the onset, we knew that we needed to create a device that would let people express themselves in light without using a line of code. And being the designers that we are, we spent all afternoon whiteboarding in a room, disagreeing with each other about what to do. And then one of the designers got very fed up and said, okay, I'm going home. And he went home and he came back on the Monday and he mocked this up. And this kind of really helped us because it gave us something to rally around and kind of like synthesize what we wanted to design. So it's basically this abstract shape. It's a box. It's got a ring of lights in the red part and then a ring of lights around it and a speaker. And what we're going to do is also create some controls to let people generate light patterns on this box that we've called Henri. I can't remember what Henri stands for. So we went through this kind of fairly messy process at the beginning, which where you're just throwing lots of wires together. We didn't really know if any of this was going to work. But then as the weeks went by, we just kind of professionalized, got better, started working with the laser cutter. learnt kind of the hard way that, because we needed to make 6 of these boxes that you can't really copy and paste hardware and undo, so we had to actually, build 6 of these physically. And then what was also quite important is like really to get away from this kind of engineering aesthetic. Method, like everything we do, in addition to being meaningful, has to be beautiful. So we had to get away from this. Then you can see, like, as we kind of progressed, it's like the insides are fairly tidy. You have a ring of LEDs. You have a strip of LEDs around the box, and then you have the speaker. And then this is what it's like when it's shut. It's emitting light patterns in the circle and light patterns around it. And as I said, like, we don't want people looking at code when they're using this. So we created also these controls that let people adjust how those lights move, what color they go, how intense they are. And then the other thing is kind of like, how do we use it? If you can imagine that, you have this box and that when you turn these dials, you're creating patterns. It's very ephemeral. Once you've created a pattern, it's gone. You can't, replay it. And we wanted people to use this as a way of like discussing design. And in order to do that, they were going to have to like replay and adjust what they were creating. So what was actually crucial was being able to record and replay what you were making with the Henri box. Unfortunately, we already had all the data. Like when you were moving the knobs, we already were encoding everything that you were doing. So it's actually very easy for us to capture people's input and then replay it through the box. But we also needed a kind of a user interface for that. So we had, next to the Henri, we had a screen, and then it's showing, the sound patterns. In the middle, it's showing what the ring is like around it, and then on the right, it's the ring that's on the right. So as people are turning the dials, it's also reflected in the screen. And then at the bottoms, you have all the recordings that people have made. So I'll just show you how this would work. Is you go into record mode, start recording, and come back, and then your recording is now there. And if you play one of those, they actually play on the box. And I just want to show you one other part of this. Here you can see we're just capturing some people twiddling these dials. And I just love that you can immediately tell when you look at that it's a human who's doing it. It's so easy these days to kind of code animation, but I just love when you look at this, you can just tell that it's a human who's using it. So at this stage, we had, the box, we had people able to control it, but we didn't want people coming to a workshop and simply sitting around playing with the box. It's very, very important, especially if you're coming from method, for people to think about why and what they're doing. So, how do we create an experience out of this? And, what we did is we needed a narrative. So we split the people up into 6 teams of 5, and each team was going to be represented by a household object. So we had a front door, a bookshelf, an urn, a Band-Aid, an iron, and a houseplant. And what we did is we gave each team a little text that just gave them a bit of context of the object that they're representing. So I'll just read you the one for the door. The front door is your daily gatekeeper. It keeps your interior safe while protecting your home, keeping its contents safe and secure. It's often the last interaction you have with your house when you leave, and the first to greet you when you return. If your front door had a language to express itself during its daily interactions with both you and the world, how would it do so? What would it say, and how would it say it? So we just wanted each team to inspire them and just make them think about what is the significance of this object that we're communicating with. And then we gave them these little scenarios. We were saying to them, okay, if a door-to-door salesman knocks at the door, how would the door communicate? So we're just giving these people these little tasks, and they were using the Henri box to show symbolically how the door would communicate. And then at the end of the workshop, we had all the teams kind of get together and then create an infomercial for their product. And then another thing that was quite important to us, was the branding side of this. And as I said, it was like, although a lot of code went into this, and it was a very, very fiddly piece of engineering, we really wanted to hide the code away from everyone. So we had this quite nice approach to the branding where if you look at these posters, you can't actually read anything because everything is abstracted by the code that's overlaid on top. But in reality, we had the posters, and then we had these red sheets of plexiglass in front. And basically, if you're looking at the poster through the red plexiglass, it hides the red part so that you can read the actual text. So this was a kind of motto for us, which was, ignore the code. And then, we had it up in the studio. And then that was it. I mean, some of the learnings and the takeaways that we took from this. One is that for digital designers, laser cutters are amazing. Even if you don't know anything about 3D modeling or 3D design, you've probably been in that situation where you have a 3D printer in your studio and nobody uses it anymore. But laser cutters are really quite different. Anybody who thinks in 2D can think in layers and can very easily, like us, build one of these boxes. Another thing was to prototype frequently. So early on, once we had a very rough version of the box running, we brought in some students from CCA and we prototyped the entire workshop with them. So it's just very important for us to learn by, kind of demoing this before we actually went live with the event. It's still interesting that even though this thing had pretty direct feedback loops, people were still using paper and pen to brainstorm. And then another thing I really quite liked about this is that what you're designing here is you're seeing in real time what you're making. There's no interpretation. It's not like designing for screen where you design something and then somebody builds it and then ports it over to another screen. It's just like what you're making is there. And lastly, I think my favorite part is that we've got 2 paddles and they've got 5 knobs in total, but we only have 2 hands. So you can't actually by yourself control this box. You need someone with you to help you out. And I think this is my favorite part about this is it was forcing people to design together. You always had at least 2 people together coming up with this language. And then lastly, I guess, this was something that we did under the Method brand, and it was just very important for us to, to stick to our brand. As I said, craft is incredibly important to us. It was very, very important for us that we moved away from the engineering aesthetic and created something that's beautifully crafted, but also so is experience. Coming out of the workshop, people were brimming with ideas around not only how they design, but what these household objects mean to them. And I think that's kind of, if you think about design through the lens of experience, it's one of the most interesting opportunities. It's design isn't always there to provide answers, but it's also there to ask questions. So last, I just want to quickly thank the team who weren't able to make it out today. That's Tim, Flavio, Melissa, Joanne, Ian, Laura, Nancy, Garrett, and Paul. If any of you are interested in the workshop, we will be running one in New York. So just shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with Livia, who's organizing it. And we're also hiring for designers in London, New York, and San Francisco. So likewise, get in touch. Thank you.